time doing today is our productivity practice problems, and this is strictly primary productivity that we're looking at. So our first question on our worksheet was A, where you had to write the equation for photosynthesis. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick a pen color. Let's do blue. So A, when we're talking about primary productivity, we really have to focus on two equations, photosynthesis and respiration. So our first one is photosynthesis, and that's when I take in CO2. Oops, I apologize. So I'm going to take in CO2 plus sunlight, which is our energy. And I'm going to take in water. And I'm going to make glucose, which is C6H12O6. And I'm also going to make oxygen as a byproduct. Right here is glucose, and sometimes in problems we'll actually refer to it as the biomass. All right. And then B was respiration. So all you really need to do is take this equation and actually switch it around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my products over here, and they're all of a sudden going to become my reactants for respiration. So I'm going to take in glucose, C6H12O6, and I'm going to take in oxygen. And I'm going to make my reactants. So I'm going to make CO2 as a byproduct. I'm going to make H2O, and I don't glow, I don't make sunlight, but I do make energy, and I make that in the form of ATP. So that was our first two problems. And next it asked us to start to calculate respiration and GPP and MPP and all that good stuff. So it gave you a really helpful hint on that worksheet, and it gave you the equation, which I'm going to rewrite right here. And that is, remember, net primary productivity is going to equal gross primary productivity minus respiration. So the first question, the net annual primary productivity per particulate wetland system is found to be 8,000 kilocalories per meter squared. If respiration by the aquatic process is 12,000, what is the gross annual productivity? So this one is plug and chug. So if it gives you net primary productivity, I'm going to look at my equation, so that's 8,000 is going to equal GPP minus respiration, and it said that it was 12,000. So I'm going to go ahead and add 12,000 to both sides. And that's going to give me GPP of 20,000. Now do me a favor when you do all of your problems that you add the units back onto them. So it's kilocalories per meter squared. Typically when you take your IP test, you get the right answer, which is +1, and then if you use the right units, it's +1. So you can only get half credit if all you do is include just the units or just the written answer in number form. So our next question is very similar, and it's using the exact same equation. I'm just going to rewrite it right here. That it's NPP is going to equal my gross primary productivity minus respiration. So let's take a look. If you measure the available biomass for a patch of forest as 10 kilograms a year, and the amount of CO2 given off in the atmosphere is 5 kilograms per year, what is the GPP? So we're going to go ahead and assume available biomass is our NPP. How much CO2 is produced? So that's a byproduct of respiration, so that is our respiration, and we're going to go ahead and plug and chug again. So 10 equals GPP minus 5. So GPP is going to go ahead and equal 15 kilograms carbon per meter squared, and that is carbon. So question 3 is a continuation of question 2, so let's go ahead and start off with our answer. Let's see, in the patch of forest in question number 2, how much energy is available to the primary producer level of herbivore consumption, assuming that 1 kilogram of carbon produces 10 kilojoules. Now, you have to assume it's talking about how much is available. The amount of CO2 that we produce that is gone into the atmosphere is not available for herbivores, so we actually have to use NPP for our calculations here. Oops, I apologize, NPP. And that was given to us as 10, kilograms of carbon. So let's go ahead and do our math with this one. So we start off with 10 kilograms of carbon, and it says for every 1 kilogram, oops, I apologize for the typo, 1 kilogram of carbon, I get 10,000 kilojoules, and that's going to give me 100,000 kilojoules of energy per meter squared. And again, I get a point for the number, and then I get a point for the unit. So here's where it gets a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to continue using the exact same equation where I take NPP equals GPP minus respiration. And let's take a look at our question. So this is an actual lab experiment. All right, we're going out and looking at algae. And this, we have our light bottle, dark bottle technique. That was the one we worked on in class. So this one we actually measured the amount of dissolved oxygen in both bottles. And we initially start off with 10 milligrams per liter of oxygen. And then we let them sit for a week. In 1 week, let's take a look at our light bottle. It's going to equal 11 milligrams per liter. And the dark bottle has a value of 5 milligrams per liter. Our light bottle is going to show us how much it's producing. And if our plant is in the dark, all it's going to show us is respiration. So using that, when I calculate R, it's going to be my change in my dark bottle compared to the initial. So that's actually going to give me a calculation of 5. I took 10 minus 5. And then NPP is actually our change in the light bottle. So I'm going to take 11 and subtract 10, which is going to give me 1. And I can go ahead and use the same equation again now that I have it all. So I have 1 equals 5. Oops, I apologize. I have 1 equals GPP minus 5. So I'm going to go ahead and add 5 to both sides. So my gross primary productivity is actually 6, and my unit again is milligrams of oxygen per liter. So that's kind of the easiest example they have on here for the light and dark bottle reactions. So here's the last question you could do on your worksheet. I made a slight typo on your copy of the worksheet for the very last question. So this is the last one that you could possibly figure out reasonably. And again, this is our light-dark method. But here we're using it on a grassland ecosystem. And it gave us this funky little table that it keeps giving us. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write my equation one more time. So I have NPP is going to equal GPP minus respiration. And I'm going to use my same calculation. So in order to get R, I'm going to look at my change in the dark bottle to initial. So I'm actually going to take 10 minus 7.2. And to get NPP, I'm going to do my change in between my light and my initial. You can see that it gained mass because it was making stuff, and that would be 17 minus 10. So 2.8 And I'm going to go ahead and continue and fill in my equation now that I figured out those two. So I have 7 equals GPP minus 2.8. And that's going to give me GPP equals 2.8 grams. And I'm just going to double check my units really quick. So it's per 10 centimeters squared. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I include that as well. So my gross primary productivity is I made 2.8 grams of grass per 10 centimeters squared. So that is, oops, you know what? This should be a 9.8. I wrote it wrong. I mean 9.8 grams. I apologize, guys. I made 9.8 grams per 10 centimeters squared, but I lost 2.8 of that to respiration. And then the very, very last question, I'll show you exactly where I made my slight typo, and I apologize, guys. I was trying to get rid of this dry weight, or kind of makes it a little bit smaller. So this should say dry weight on yours. Yours, it says wet weight. And right here, it says 1, but it really should be 14, and I feel terrible for that. This question has 2 parts to it. The first one is, what is the percentage moisture of the samples? So what it asks you to do is how much of this is actually just water. When we're looking at NPP, we really want to look at how much glucose it made, not water. So the way I did that first is I just used my initials. So I took my wet weight and dry weight. So I took 14 minus 9, and I took it over my wet weight, which is 14. And that gave me 5 over 14, and that's approximately 36%. So 36% of this is water. So what I'm going to do is now it's asked me to calculate the NPP, the respiration, and the GPP for the species diatom. So same thing again. I'm annoyingly going to write out the equation. My net primary productivity is going to equal my gross primary productivity, how much it made total, minus how much it used for respiration. So let's go ahead and do it. So we said respiration is going to be my difference between the initial and the dark bottle. So that's 1. So I took 8 and 9 and took the difference. My NPP is going to be my initial minus the light bottle. So that's 2. And so I can finally do my calculations for GPP. So I have 2 equals 1, equals GPP minus 1. So my gross primary productivity is going to equal 3. Now I'm going to go back and make sure I have my units. And here we go. My units are grams. So respiration is 1 gram was used, NPP is 2 grams, and my total GPP is 3 grams. Your quiz will be things like calculating respiration in a light-dark model, strictly for primary productivity, and we will spend more time with secondary productivity later.